What if every young woman entered adulthood already knowing her strengths, her values, and the power of her voice? My guest today believes that would change the world, and she's building a movement to make it happen. I'm Mike Desjardins, and on today's episode of The Mike Method, my guest is Lauren MacKinnon, a former COO turned executive coach who's traded the corporate boardroom for a mission-driven classroom, one that's preparing the next generation of confident, capable leaders through her program, SuperpowHER. With over 20 years of leadership experience in a male-dominated industry, Lauren knows firsthand how costly it can be to spend decades conforming to someone else's definition of leadership, only to have to unlearn it altogether. In our conversation, we explore why building confidence and leadership skills before adulthood is game-changing, how peer groups can give girls a lifelong network of allies, and why courage, not confidence, is the real starting point for growth. You'll also learn how Lauren's work with teenage girls is transforming not just them, but her too, as she sheds her own layers of corporate conformity to show up with more authenticity. If you've ever wondered how to truly equip the next generation of girls for leadership, or how to reclaim your own voice along the way, this episode will give you both inspiration and a blueprint. Let's dive in. Lauren, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm happy to be here.
So I want to go back to the genesis of SuperpowHER, and I'm very specifically pronouncing it like that, and you'll tell us why. I want to go back to the time when you realized that you just had to do this. Like SuperpowHER had to be out in the world. Why?
There was a moment. So I struggled with confidence in my youth and teen years and kind of worked myself through it somehow into adulthood. And it was always kind of behind the scenes. And it wasn't until I started coaching several women in engineering, construction, architecture, the industry that I came from, where it's very heavily male dominated, women trying to get into executive roles and struggling. And I was having a lot of coaching conversations, developing programs for these women to run through, to build agency, confidence, understanding their identity, purpose, strengths, all of these things, that I went, why is this the same story every leader I'm speaking with coming up all the time? These issues with, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't know what my values or what makes me so unique. And I thought, okay, so all of these women, all of these people that I've been coaching are struggling with the same thing. It's this underlying thread. Where is that missing at the beginning of time? Mm-hmm. Why is that not being taught earlier? Why is that not a common thread that you've learned through your life and you kind of understand who you are coming into your first job or the work world? And I just thought that needs to be somewhere where we need to start, focus. And I was actually just talking with a couple of girlfriends of mine, one of your friends, Catherine Durazio, actually. And she goes, oh my gosh, if you were to set up something for young girls, my daughter would be signed up tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, oh, wow, okay, so I've got to go to the drawing board and think about what this needs to be. And it was basically over a weekend. And I just dove right into the workshop and what needed to be included. And it was a lot of the same concepts and ideas that I was teaching and coaching adults in. I was applying to youth in a way that could resonate with them on their level. Mm-hmm. And I just cried pouring into this material because it was just so important to me. And it just felt like a piece of my legacy that I was now giving to that next generation. And it felt like just such a moment of, this is what I need to be doing. This is the work that I want to do.
Well, and I can imagine trying to fix something like that, as you and I both know, trying to work on confidence or emotional intelligence or presence in an adult, so much harder when there's all these ingrained habits, there's ingrained mindsets, there's, self-limiting beliefs that have been there since childhood. And so when you're trying to get somebody to break out of that pattern, you're trying to erase like 30 plus years, 20 plus years of ingrained conditioning to get them to show up in a way that will help them to move forward with purpose towards what they want. And what I love that you're doing is you're saying, well, hey, but if we gave these skills to them when they were younger, they wouldn't know that would be their programming. They would have empowering beliefs as opposed to having self-limiting beliefs. They would have confidence versus shrinking away. They would just show up with presence because that's how they've always showed up.
Exactly. And I think that's where I know myself coming into, my first corporate job, that wasn't there for me. You kind of have to build it on your own and figure out where you land. And I feel like a lot of my years in the corporate environment I was in, I was conforming to just what leadership looked like around me because I
Right.
didn't have my own script coming into that. I didn't have my own template of who I was. So I saw the leaders around me and I said, okay, well, I guess that's what I do. And I'm going to conform here and I'm going to conform here. And then
Yeah.
20 years in that environment, I ended up going, oh, wait, who am I? I don't even know
Yeah.
what I'm bringing to the table because I've just picked pieces of other people into my leadership presence.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of young leaders, right? I mean, we've all had that experience of getting your first job or second job. And even in the first job, there's leaders you run into and you're like, well, that person sucks as a leader. So I don't want to be like them. So whatever their negative qualities are, I'm going to do like the diametric opposite to that. Right. And
Yeah.
then the ones where you're like, oh my God, this person was like a mentor to me when I first got started in my career, we're going to emulate those qualities. So we're emulating the qualities of the mentors that we see in our lives, or maybe mentor if somebody is lucky enough to have a leader that they would think that highly of in their first career. And then we're doing the opposite of the leaders that we think are just like terrible. But as you say, that's not being authentically me. That's like mimicking in one place, which is nothing wrong with that, and moving away from something negative in the other place, also nothing wrong with that. But where do I find myself in that path?
Yeah. It's a very deep, the work that we do with, or the work that I do with leaders, say in their 40s, to peel back and understand who they are is a lot harder. Like you said, after 20, 30 years of, I don't know my identity. I don't know what my strengths are that I'm bringing to the table. So to do this work early and say, okay, well, I know what my values are. I know what my strengths are. I know I'm still developing them as I go, but at least this language, these seeds have been planted early enough that I know who I am going into this, and I'm
Mhm.
going to keep that. I'm going to keep that as part of who I am
Mhm.
as different life complexities are thrown at me along my path.
And so where do you so walk me through what these young women not need to learn, but what are they going to learn as part of being into this program? Like what's the path that they're on developmentally with you?
Yeah, so there's a few different modalities. So there's workshops and peer groups.
Mhm.
And coming up, we'll do some online coursework. But the idea around it is building leadership principles. So there'll be a component of understanding communication, collaboration, emotional intelligence, leadership models that we teach at the adult level, understanding those early, how we communicate with our peers, how we navigate conflict, critical thinking, problem solving. There'll be lots of different exercises and working that we'll do with girls through that in the workshops. However, the biggest, like where the magic actually happens, in my opinion, is in the peer groups. So that's bringing groups of girls together, having them in a room for 6 to 7 times a year, where we're going to be learning different leadership tools, how to communicate, but more importantly, how to collaborate with each other and mastermind challenges.
Hmm.
So girls come in together and we hear from a really awesome speaker in the space of anywhere from how to interview for university applications to how to put together a resume, how to have better body image, body positivity, how do you cultivate resilience. We'll work on strengths and what your inner superpowers are. But as well, we'll be sitting around the table and saying, okay, what's been going on in each other's
Hmm.
lives? What's been really challenging? And let's have a conversation about that. So it's creating an environment where girls can come and share what's been really problematic, and we can have this safe environment where we can discuss it. So one girl brings a challenge of, I'm struggling with, say, a bully.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure how to deal with this situation. And we talk about it
Hmm.
and we say, okay, well, let's whiteboard. What are some of the ways we know how to deal with bullying? And we group mind it together and come up with a plan of what we can do. Here's some thoughts on how you can handle this. And even if somebody in that group has not experienced what that one girl has experienced, they're going to learn from the exercise of us all coming together to support the challenge of the one girl. So we see this in executive development peer groups. I lead those as well. And the power of it is forming this circle of trust within your group, that you have this bond with this group of girls that I hope really carry through all of your high school, middle school, and high school years
Mhm.
and beyond. but it's forming a bond with people with like-minded peers where you can actually have this connection of, I want to help you, I know how to support you, I'm learning how to mentor you as well as I'm learning as I'm going as well. So it's this learning and relearning and this circle that's forming as we're creating bonds within the group.
What I love about that approach, a number of things, but one, it's like all the skills that they're just not taught in school, irrespective of what the school is, right? Like these are critical life skills that will pay massive dividends throughout the rest of their lives. And yet at the same time, as we're in this world of everybody's connected through social media and, AI is taking off, those really aren't connections in a lot of cases. Like, we feel hyper connected, but why are people so lonely? And I feel like as a result of you creating peer groups, these girls now have people they can go to that they trust, that they know will hold their confidence and would enable them to share what's going on for them. And at the same time, they get to share what they've learned along the way, right? Like in your building example, if somebody had gone through it and it come out the other side and said like, this worked and it didn't, that's going to resonate more than maybe hearing it from a parent, for instance, right? Even though the parent might be correct in their approach. And the idea that those peer groups would, last their lifetime, to know that you've got a group of young women that have each other's backs is like, it's phenomenal. I mean, you and I've both seen how powerful those peer groups are when you meet as adults. But imagine if we'd had the opportunity to build those peer groups when we're younger. And there's no other. This is why I was so fascinated when I learned about what you're up to. I thought I have to have you on this podcast because I don't know another place that this exists.
Mm-hmm.
And the model that you're building is so unique. So what have you seen so far from the girls that you've worked with? Like, what are the, I'm sure when you envisioned doing this, you had like an idea of what it was going to be like and who was going to come to it. And all with best intention, there's always outcomes that we don't expect, right? That are going to occur as a result of doing something like this. So what are some of the lovely surprises that have occurred for you?
Oh, it's been fantastic. So going in, I also didn't know that I could actually hold space with a group of teenagers. I
Okay.
in that world. So, I mean, the first time I kind of went in with my whole syllabus. This is all the things we're going to cover, and if we can
Yeah.
get maybe 50% of it, awesome.
Yeah.
And we were able to cover all of it, and the girls just soaked it up. Like, the feedback was incredible. I just felt like part of something, a safe circle where I could share. I don't have an outlet like this in my life where this is a space where I can kind of bring forward ideas and have these discussions within a group of peers that all get it. They all understand it. They all know what I'm going through. And the magic of it is I'm not doing this with the group of everybody's best friends. I'm doing this with groups of girls that may not know each other. And they come from different backgrounds and different experiences. And that's what's so great about I'm getting different experiences into my challenge. But some of the things that came out of them were just the idea of like, wow, I actually, now that I know my superpower, when I think about it, when I'm in a challenge at school or at home, if I can really zone in on what that superpower means to me, I approach things differently. So we do something like we figure out a spirit superpower persona comes out in something that you can put an image to. This one young girl, her image was a hummingbird. All of her values, all of her strengths, she could personify into this hummingbird. So I said, okay, well, just draw your hummingbird on a piece of paper and carry it in your backpack. And every time you need to kind of think about a challenge or somewhere where you need to be brave, take a look at it and see how it impacts you. And she came to the next session and just said, like, I looked at that picture countless times and I just kept like being brave. And, you hear something like that and it makes you cry and you just go, wow, like this has impact in order to be able to change even one girl being able to be more brave in a situation that she's facing. It's incredible.
I love this, this idea of having, a spirit approach. And a friend of mine actually, Todd Herman, wrote a book called Alter Ego. And he works with high performance athletes and musicians and people who need to tap into something inside of them, but they need their ego, as you're saying, like almost a spirit version of themselves. And some of the examples he gives is like Lady Gaga's name is not Lady Gaga, right? Like Sasha Fierce that Beyonce created, right? The Black Mamba, like all of these are characters that were designed so that that person could create a confidence and a presence that wasn't attached to who they are. Now, some of them have like said it out loud, but many of them put themselves in that place. And some of them even have tokens that they carry. For instance, they might have like a certain bracelet that they put on, or they might put like something like a polished rock in their pocket, or they put a certain ring on, and nobody else really realizes, or a necklace, like they're doing it, but they know when they put that on, whatever that thing is, that's now them invoking that alter ego and invoking that superpower. And I feel like, when you ask kids, could you be the best version of yourself in front of a group of people? Many of them might shrink back from that to get up on the stage. But if you told them, I need you to go out on stage and pretend you're an astronaut, or pretend you're a rock star, or pretend you're a sports athlete, they would be able to go up there and act it out. There's no difference. And so, right, the concept that you're bringing to them is this concept of choice, but you're taking away the self-limiting belief of their own personality or background and telling them you can create this other image of yourself, and it's kind of up to you. And then you get to use that whenever you need it. You get to use that.
Yeah. There's a thing about confidence, and a lot of feedback from parents are, I want my child to gain more confidence. I want her to enter this next phase with confidence. And I thought about, okay, so how do you train confidence? Well, you can't really train confidence. You're having to put yourself into challenging situations where you have to be brave, and that will build confidence. Like, I can do this. I can cross that hurdle. I can actually do hard things. So it's giving them the courage to, okay, this is who I am. I know I have this inside of me. I have this brilliance, this uniqueness. How can I channel that in order to do the hard things? And that will bring me confidence.
It reminds me of a movie, We Three Kings. It's got, I think it's Clooney and Matt Damon, and they're army guys, and they've got to cross this battlefield, and there's all these bullets flying, whatever. And but it's quite a distance they have to run. And Matt Damon turns to George Clooney, and he's like, I don't have the courage to run across that space. And Clooney turns to him and says, yeah, I don't need you to have the courage. I just need you to take the risk and start running. The courage will show up along the way.
So good. Yeah. And that's it. And that's the base of it all. I think about what's missing today is, with this generation coming in, and you talk about anxious generation, there's not a lot of opportunities for kids to develop that, to take risks, and to feel like it's okay to fail. And the failure with that is going to generate more confidence for the next time I fail. And the next time, it's just this compounding interest that occurs. So to put this into perspective, we're basically creating a space where all of these risks can be taken. And then over time, this will build the confidence.
To think about where are there zones for kids to have that level of psychological safety? Because you're really creating that for them to say, here's a place where you can try these things out. And if you fail, it's okay, because we're all kind of here to fail together. And, I know with my daughter, when she said, I forget what it was she was trying to learn. I was riding a bike. So she was trying to ride a bike, and she's like, I can't ride a bike. I'm like, well, you can't ride a bike yet. And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, yeah, you haven't ridden a bike yet, but you've gotten on the bike and you've gone a distance and then you've fallen off. Yeah, I can't ride a bike. Right. But yet, you will eventually be able to ride a bike.
Yes.
And she's like, well, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, because you couldn't walk at one point. You were crawling on the ground very quickly, but you were not walking. And then you got up and you walked a little bit, and then you fell on the ground. And at no point did I think she's never going to walk. That just wasn't part of my thought process. So when you got on the bike, my thought process was not, you're never going to be able to pedal this bike. I'm like, well, you're probably going to fail a bunch of times, and then you'll be able to ride a bike. And you're taking that sort of psychological safety and you're putting it out into the bigger things where there's also bigger emotions and the risks feel bigger than learning how to ride a bike or learning to swim or whatever that thing happens to be. And I don't know that there's a lot of other places that those girls have that to go to,
Yeah.
if any.
Mm-hmm. I think this is the place, and it couldn't be more needed than right now. I just look at the girls who've come through the programs and just saying, I've come out feeling better. I've come out feeling like I have a place, or I have a group that gets me. Where I think about all the extracurricular activities that kids can be in these days, and it's to the next activity, or it's performance based and sporting or whatever that is. There's not time to just slow down and sit with the peers, the group of peers, and say, how are we doing? How can we support you? I want to learn how to be a friend. I want to learn how to make a connection so deep that we end up being long-term friends that support each other like allies. And I think about even just when I was going through high school, and my experience was I was in a lot of sports. All of those friends, it's all situational. You kind of lose layers of these friends as you go.
Yeah.
None of them got really deep. We never talked about a lot of challenges that were happening in our lives. We just were surface level friends.
Yeah.
This creates an opportunity to go a little bit deeper with a group of friends. My idea is that once you've entered the ecosystem of SuperpowHER, that when you're now in, say, you're going to McGill or you're overseas at Oxford for your university, you're still connected to that group of peers. And that group of peers becomes the people who can help open doors in the future. So it's really, I think, and I don't want to make a generalization, but for men to leverage relationships comes more naturally than for women. So for us to say, oh, let me pull into my network and see who can connect me here, it's a lot more challenging. But women create relationships a lot easier.
Yes.
So there's this weird kind of double-edged sword where it's like, okay, well, I create them easily, but then I don't leverage them.
Right.
So to create this environment where I'm going to tap into my superpower network and see who can help me with this challenge, or, hey, who's gone through superpower and is at McGill University this year. I'd love to connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to create this space where people can really use the network that they're making and leverage that in the future.
And the world still operates off of who you know. I know there's a lot of people push back against that principle of equity being broken relative to that comment. But the reality is that who you're connected to still will control a lot of the opportunities that you get in life. And the ability for you to have a really solid peer network as early as possible is important. I've gone back to Sauder at UBC and spoken there. And, I said, like, I always tell the students that are there, there's usually like about 400 of them from whatever class. I'm like, look around the room and look at the people that are sitting in this room. So right now you're students. Cool. So you guys might do some similar things. You might be in similar clubs, whatever. You're going to graduate. You're going to get your first job and you will be reporting to somebody. You won't have any direct reports, but you'll start a job, or maybe you do entrepreneurship. But at a business school, there's a certain path you're probably going to go on. And then eventually one day you'll get promoted and now you're a manager. And you still have no budgets or no power or anything, but you're a manager and you've got people reporting to you. And then another day, you find out after a few years that you've been promoted to director. Well, now you have managers that report to you who have, individual contributors that report to you, and you have a budget. And then, I can tell you that what happens next is one day you're going to get tapped to become a VP. And if you keep going, you're going to eventually get on the C-suite, or, you might become CEO or CFO or whatever that your chosen path is. So everyone in this room is going that direction. So imagine if you stayed in touch with all the people that were in the room here and built great connections in the university. You'll all be the people making the core decisions. So any partnerships you want to do, business deals you want to do, sell things to each other. When you walk in the room and you've maintained your connection base, which is easier to do today than ever before because of things like LinkedIn. And I guess maybe Snapchat will become the new LinkedIn for the next generation, but whatever. So you'll have these connections and with the people that make the decisions. And I said to them, like, I can tell you it's true because that's what happened with all of my friends. And when I go to reunions and I check in to see what everybody's up to, they're all in the power decision positions to make the decisions. And so the closer that you stay connected, the more chance there is that there's an opportunity for the new job, for the sale, for the partnership, for whatever it is that you're trying to get done, that you build this and you're providing that to these girls.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, like, okay, so one of the things I've noticed with mentor-mentee relationships with mine and with others is that the mentors get as much out of the experience as the mentees. And I think when people ask me, like, how do I get a mentor? Well, why would a mentor want to mentor me? I'm like, well, I express to them, like, you're going to actually provide a lot of value to the mentor. You don't think of it that way. You think you're going to learn from this wise mentor, and but they're going to learn a ton from you, and they'll express that to you throughout the relationship. So with that, I'm super curious, how have these girls changed you?
Great question, Mike. It's interesting that you say that because I feel like I've been on this path of transformation from the moment I started this to today. And the change is occurring in little ways. Like, it'll probably take me years to unfold and recover from the corporate environment. I was COO for a number of years before leaving the hamster wheel. But there's a level of put togetherness, conformity, a level of, this is the way it goes, black and white. That was sort of the way that I was taught and the way that I kind of have lived my life. And this next generation of girls are really opening me up to just be myself as much as I'm telling them to be themselves. It's this moment for me to say, well, I'm going to let my hair down. Why am I still conforming? Why am I sitting here teaching the next generation of how to be free and how to be themselves and to show up in rooms completely authentically when I'm still struggling to, peel back my onion? Mm-hmm. So there's been many moments along this journey where I've had to realize, wow, it's tough once you've conformed to come back out of that and really look at yourself in a different light. And I just think of all of the women and the people I've coached and how hard that is to undo and how hard it is for me to undo at the same time that I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't have to be undone later. Right. So I think there's this level of openness and freeness and femininity that is coming out in me. I think a lot of corporate leadership these days, for many years and still is, a very masculine energy. And there's a lot of that's still in play. And to unwind and to get back to that feminine place for myself has been an incredible journey. And I'm finding that I'll always likely be learning new things about myself and undoing.
You've really tapped into the existential crisis, which is part of the challenge of authenticity. Like, if I show up as who I really am and be authentic, I think, Brene Brown would call it vulnerability. So she's like, vulnerability is really her version of authenticity. And she's like, vulnerability is not rampant self-disclosure. Like, it is showing up authentically as who I am. And the challenge is that the existential crisis from philosophy is that if you really knew me, you wouldn't love me. So I can't show you who I really am because I could get rejected. And then you would reject the core of who I am. That's terrifying. So that's the existential crisis. To dig one level deeper, if I really knew me, I wouldn't love me. And so that's really hard as an adult to, when you've seen a model and you've lived in a certain way, to say, no, I'm going to shed that programming. And I'm going to go to a place where I am vulnerable and as is appropriate for the situation. And I am authentic. That inherently requires a risk. It feels risky to do that. And obviously things like psychological safety, which you're creating for the girls, makes that easier to do. But as adults, that's the programming that we have to fight against to be able to do what you've done, which is to, as you said, lean into your femininity and say, like, I can be powerful. I can make a difference in the world. I can be in business. And I can also be the Lauren that I truly am, like the authentic self, and not worry about, what people's impression of that is, because the people that are drawn to that are my people, and the people that aren't drawn to that are clearly not my people, and that's okay.
Yeah. I look at leadership tables right now and I think about if everybody came with their authentic selves and their values aligned and their purpose, and I'm coming to a leadership table with that, can you imagine what innovation and creativity could be unlocked?
Yeah. Well, it would save a lot of time, right? Because you think about the amount of posturing and like ego boosting and that takes place in those environments, when I can tell you, like, I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't know how many boardrooms and leaders we've developed in that time around North America. And I can genuinely tell you that pretty much everybody is just trying to figure it out every day. Nobody has it mastered. Nobody is perfect. Everyone is showing up and trying to do their best and hoping that a lot of people, anyone that's really trying hard probably has imposter syndrome. Anyone that is actually doing anything that's super challenging or is in their learning and growth space is going to face imposter syndrome. And that is most of the most successful people I've really ever met, aside from narcissists. So they've parked them to the side because they don't have any concept of being an imposter, but they also have beliefs that they're capable of things they aren't. So there's that. And so I think that, having SuperpowHER for these young girls and getting them have this learning this early is really setting themselves up to not have to reprogram themselves after spending, 20, 30, whatever, spending a long time in the corporate world, watching everybody and trying to figure out how to conform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think they say something like 76% of leaders look at themselves in the mirror and can't recognize who they are. And right. If you think about that, I mean, how much energy is put into conforming?
Yeah.
And when you have, you think about your day as yourself, as you're totally aligned, you're leading with purpose, you're in your sweet spot. The amount of energy that takes versus gives is completely different than when you're trying to operate in a space where you're having to be somebody else, because you're having to put energy into that persona of yourself. And so, burnout, stressed out, all of these things that are happening in our leadership tables could be avoided if we just say, okay, like, hey, and I'm a leader where maybe this company, this leadership team, I'm not values aligned with. Well, then I'm not going to be at that company or at that leadership table. I'm going to make a different choice.
Yeah.
I think, if some people could just say, like, if that's how I want to live my life, I want to be aligned. I want to be I want to be with an organization that's values aligned, purpose driven. And I'm not going to make no exception to that. Think about that. And I just think, this next generation that's coming up, I've done thousands of interviews for engineering jobs back a number of years ago, and they're asking, what is your mission statement? What are your goals for sustainability? Mm-hmm. What is my path? How much time am I going to get with my leader? They're asking these questions where that wasn't being asked before.
No,
so,
that wasn't part of the interview process. Yeah.
No, I'm being interviewed as much as they're being interviewed, and I think that's awesome.
Yes.
So this is the shift that's going to happen over time, is that leaders are going to have to be coming to the table with better communication, better collaboration. EI needs to be there. You need to be equipped with these tools in order to be a successful leader, especially now in the age of AI, where the human side of skills need to be there. So I'm not a great leader and I don't have any technical skills or whatever that might be for my job. That's going to put me at such a disadvantage that I need to build up those human skills. Yeah. And that's inherently what I'm teaching in these peer groups and these workshops is building that muscle early. That's going to be the skills of tomorrow.
So imagine we're able to fast forward ahead to, let's say a year, 2, even 3 years from now. You pick the time frame. And we're back together to celebrate the success of SuperpowHER. What are we celebrating?
My gosh. So let's say like 5 years from now.
Yeah, let's do that. 5 years. What are we celebrating together?
We are celebrating Canada-wide peer groups impacting thousands of girls. They're part of a bigger movement that will at that time involve some online coursework. There will be an opening track for boys. So it's not going to be just the girls, it will also include a track for boys in this development plan. And I feel like we're starting a movement of a next generation of leaders that are capable, ready, confident, hold agency, will not conform, that will be entering the workforce.
Oh my God, I want to be there with you to celebrate that. That sounds fantastic. Lauren, I really appreciate you making time to have this conversation today. Yeah, thank you for the work that you're doing. I'd love for one thing in closing. Is there a book that along this journey, as you've been building all this out and you've been thinking about this, have you come across a book that has been like profound to you in helping to support the direction that you decided to go, or even in your own life as you were figuring out how you wanted to show up in the world? What have you read, or what have, it might be, maybe it's a podcast, but or even a movie, but like, what is one thing that you, when you look back on, you're like, this, I'm so glad this came into my life?
Yeah, it was actually Own It by Sally Krawcheck. So she's
Okay.
the former woman of Wall Street, one of the original women
Yeah.
on Wall Street that left to form Ellevest, so a group of female founders and helping with investment funds for women in the US. She wrote a book called Own It, and it was really about owning yourself,
Yeah.
owning your flaws, owning your strengths, and not compromising. And I read that at a very pivotal part of my career. And that one I recommend to a lot of women in my life, and it's been super impactful.
We're going to drop a link to that book into the show notes. Lauren, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.